Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we're talking about the Clone Wars Season 6, Episodes 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. The Clovis and the Banking Clan, and then the plot of The Disappeared. All that and more after a commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. My name is Matthew. I'm your host. I'm joined as always for Clone Wars discussions by Riki and Sarah Hayashi. So folks, you excited to dive into the rom-coms of Anakin Skywalker and Jar Jar Binks?
I wish these episodes had disappeared.
Yeah, we've been talking so much about how these later seasons, they get so much better, and I really think they do, and I think the last 4 episodes and some of the stuff in Season 5 was peak Clone Wars, and Season 7 is really good. Now we're hitting a real low point again, unfortunately.
Yeah, Season 6 feels very tossed together.
Yeah,
it was.
And I think
literally.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's a lot of the bottom of the barrel. Okay, what are the stories we didn't get to tell, or what are the episodes we didn't get to air, kind of stuff.
In fact, I mean, this is probably as good a place to say this as any. But this first arc, this Clovis arc, is actually from Season 4. And I believe was just made in Season 4 and not aired. And they jury-rigged it here. And you can tell because Ian Abercrombie is once again the voice of Palpatine instead of Tim Curry.
It didn't sound like Tim Curry. Okay, I was wondering what was going on there.
Yeah, I feel like the decision to cut these episodes from Season 4 was correct.
Yeah. Let me give a quick plot summary. Often we'll say, go back, watch these episodes so you can follow along with us. These times I think you're going to be just as happy not. I think you may want to, and that's perfectly fine. They're not bad. Well, no. they're bad episodes, but they're bad episodes for a really good show, so I think it's overall worth watching, but very skippable. Or if you just watched them a long time ago and have either forgotten or more likely blocked them out of your memory, let's bring up some bad memories for you and just quickly summarize the plots.
The first arc at least gives us a view into a part of the galaxy that we have not seen, and it's something that's mentioned several times. Yeah. So it expands on the canon.
I would actually argue that both of them do, especially because the way the second one gets into some issues of magic versus force use, but not very consistently. But anyway, so the first arc, the Clovis arc, starts with Padme traveling to the planet of Scipio to meet with the Moons, who are the
Munes. M-Y, basically.
Got it, thank you. The Munes, who are, for those who know some of the deeper canon, Darth Plagueis, the person who trains Darth Sidious, is a Mune. And they're also the ones who run the Banking Clan, which we've heard about in some other episodes, especially back in Season 4. And there's some corruption going on, and so Padme gets a little bit wrapped up in the corruption, especially because her old friend, Rush Clovis, is hanging around here. Rush Clovis, for those who don't remember, was a separatist leader who Padme at one point had been close with, possibly some romantic affiliations with. And now he's in real trouble because he's trying to help the Banking Clan as their representative, but there's all kinds of corruption and all gets very, mixed up, and Padme gets in trouble, and the plot doesn't make much more sense. Except for the fact that Anakin comes along, and Anakin has, as you can imagine, the calm, reasonable approach that a person should have when they find out that the love of their life is spending time with a possible ex. To Anakin's defense, Clovis is trying to manipulate this into a situation to get back with Padme, but Anakin turns into an utter jealous wreck. So there's more adventures. Clovis now does some political machinations to become head of the Banking Clan. He becomes head of the Banking Clan, and that position is officially endorsed by the Republic through a lot of political machinations, and Count Dooku is kind of pulling some strings behind this, but Dooku is assuring him that he wants an independent Banking Clan and everything will go okay. And then Dooku pulls off what I think can only be described as his sudden but inevitable betrayal, and it turns out that actually Clovis is getting screwed over, and now everybody's in trouble, and lots more fighting, and lots of Anakin being ridiculously toxic, masculine, jealous guy, and there's fighting, and eventually a situation winds up where Anakin is trying to save both Clovis and Padme, who've gotten blasted over a ledge, and Padme really wants Anakin to save both, and Anakin is maybe trying, but isn't sure he can. And Clovis says, no, you can't work, and he lets go. Basically sort of like killing himself to stop the possibility of Padme dying. And I think, and at the end of all of this, it winds up that because so much sad corruption has been revealed, and because Clovis didn't work out and the Republic got hurt, much to his sadness, poor Chancellor Palpatine will have to take on control of the banking clan, and he's just so sad about it. Yeah. Did I miss any important points of this plot?
I mean, no, there's like details that I want to get into. I feel like Riki's going to be upset that you didn't mention Embo.
Okay.
Embo.
Yes.
Okay, that was the best part of this arc. Embo is the bounty hunter who has been hired by Sidious, in his Sidious guise, to kind of direct all of the traffic into this hole. Mm-hmm. He like pretends to try to assassinate Clovis to make him seem more legitimate to Padme, and then like does some other sinister things to make it look like something's going on, which forces their hand to like investigate further. But the best part, there's two best parts. He's got a dog. He's got like a space dog. I forget what the name of the dog was. It was like Maruk or something like that. And then Embo is the bounty hunter that has like the steel hat that he uses like a weapon, much like Captain America.
That's totally the vibe I was getting.
But in this episode, he uses it as a sled because they are on a snowy mountaintop and there's like an escape, and he uses it as a sled and just like slides down the hill on his steel hat, and it's fantastic.
Yeah,
I was
definitely getting strong Captain America vibes with what he did with that helmet.
Yeah.
And it's funny though.
It also reminds me a lot of James Bond. James Bond has a lot of like snowy chases, riding ridiculous things like a cello case in one movie.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I definitely have fond memories of that. And I would say that I'm glad you brought up Embo, because there was one other thing that he did that was not cool, like an awesome effect, but just kind of a little brilliant move that I really appreciated, which is that part of basically Clovis gets Padme to be part of this plot to try and like steal records from the banking clan to show that they're war profiteers, which we kind of already knew, but now we're trying to really prove it. And as part of that, and then when Clovis can't do it, Padme's assistant is supposed to blow up this power center as a way to knock out all the power in the vault so that shenanigans can happen. And Embo is waiting there by where, when Padme's assistant comes to blow it up, but he waits till after she blows it up and then shoots her. And at first I was like, wait, why would he do that? Until I realized what that did was, now her body was found right where the bomb was set, which completely implicated, correctly so, because Padme had done it, implicated Padme. And I was like, oh, okay, that's actually kind of brilliant what Embo did there. So that was definitely a fun moment.
Yeah, Embo's good at his job.
Yeah. So I would say actually one other positive I can find in this was I liked getting to see Padme being so manipulative. Like, she is very political, and she lies bald-facedly to the Munes. She kind of plays on some of their feelings of like, how could you not trust me, and sort of really kind of like makes them feel guilty in ways that I thought were really kind of cool. Like it's fun to watch her being a political animal and playing the game that Palpatine also plays, though we know she's doing it for much better purposes.
Yeah. So the Clovis is like adopted by some of the moons. How do you say it? I forget. Mune. Okay. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And yes, the corrupt, he thinks the corruption is just like the 5 top banking folks.
The core 5.
The core 5, right. Yeah. Good name. Very descriptive. And they've got a secret account, which is basically they're just lending money to the separatists without like interest, with like a 0% interest rate, and a bunch of really exciting banking terminology. which is correct. The thing does happen. So, like, he's wanting to take down these 5, but he doesn't want the banking clan to be out of control of the Munes as a whole, just these 5 corrupt leaders.
Right.
I feel like is maybe an important point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like on some level, I did really appreciate some of the stuff they tried to do with the banking clans, you know, especially, and we've talked about before about how a lot of this show is kind of commentary on what was happening with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which were still kind of fairly new. And this was like during that period, during the Bush years, when a lot of stuff about like the role of Halliburton and other sort of big financial companies was coming to light. And so I kind of liked this idea of a story about war profiteers and you know, big business driving some of this. But it was so heavy-handed. And it was so just like you say, like the whole thing is about basically like trying to refinance a loan, you know? But in this way of like, you know, if the separatists don't get to do this, then like the separatist alliance will fall apart next week. Or if the Republic doesn't do it, the Republic will fall apart in 2 weeks. And it just felt like, also maybe it winds up unintentionally being the best argument against monopoly control of banks that I've ever seen. Because if ever there was an argument for diversification of the international finances outside of like, you know, 3 or 4 major companies, this is a great argument for it.
Yeah.
But that's the part of this that doesn't make sense to me. Is that the banking clan is seemingly the only bank, and they are lending money to both sides in this war, so they are independent, ? And yet at the end of this episode, they fall under the control of Palpatine, who is the leader of the Republic. So maybe the banking clan should stop loaning money to the separatists now, and that will end the war. War
won, the end.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the politics of this show, especially in the weaker episodes, there's no consistency. And it just, the political situation is, and the financial situation is whatever will serve the plot they're trying to tell.
Yeah.
And I kind of have the same complaint about the Force and magic in the later episodes that we'll get to, but it's definitely it felt very inconsistent here, which is too bad, because I think the points they're making about, you know, banking and war and profiteering are really interesting ones.
Yeah, they try to set up these situations where there is like a third entity that is independent of the separatists and the Republic, and there is, you know, like a neutral alliance, but then at the end, like when they bring it under the control of the Chancellor, that's the part that doesn't make sense. Like why is the banking clan not maintaining some kind of neutrality in this? Otherwise, yeah, like it's. You work for the Republic now. End of discussion.
I mean, I think it kind of just speaks overall to my frustration with all of the properties around this time period. You know, primarily the prequel movies and the Clone Wars shows, which is they took what is in many ways the most nuanced and complex and morally gray period of time, at least in the Skywalker saga, in sort of the Star Wars universe. And then this was the time where they decided to make the story the most kid-friendly. And especially the Clone Wars. Like, this could be an HBO show. You know, this could be a, like, Game of Thrones, you know, Galactic Senate. Maybe not as much, you know, sex and gratuitous violence, but, like, the levels of complexity and nuance and moral grayness are so high. And I just feel like, you know, telling a story about refinancing of loans and international trade that a 10-year-old can get very interested in, if they're not a really weird 10-year-old like me maybe, is just a very hard thing to do.
Yeah, and even like as a 30-year-old, I am not interested in a story about refinancing loans and who's like financing parts of this war in a very like nuts and bolts sense, right? Like as soon as you start bringing interest rates into this discussion, like I don't care. It's just like I don't know. It's weird. And then there's also this like voting to get Clovis to be the head because he's the perfect guy because he used to be Republic, but then he betrayed them for the Separatists. So he's got supporters on both sides.
Neither side trusts him.
Yeah,
both sides trust him.
Yeah, and it's just like I don't know.
No, I agree with you. I sometimes feel like you could have made this a much broader story about like there's financial corruption and the financial institutes that are behind the war, and we just don't go into the specifics, and that would have been just fine.
Mm-hmm.
But once you start to go into some of it, it's kind of like it's sort of how I feel about some Star Trek episodes, where I'm like, I don't care at all about how warp speed works. It just works, and that's okay. But once you give me a plot point based on a specific point of how warp speed works, now you need to explain all the other ways that warp speed works, and they don't add up. And that's a problem. That's exactly how I feel here.
Yeah, exactly. Like, once you start laying down this very, very firm and, like, codifying the rules of this universe, which don't actually make sense, or, like, if they do make sense, you're going to have to go super duper in depth because this is an entire universe. And I don't think you can just, like, sum up the political machinations of these two warring factions in, like, one episode. But yeah, as soon as you start pinning down those details, then everything else starts crumbling apart and just not making sense anymore. Whereas if you're kind of hand-wavy about it and just tell the story that you want to tell without getting bogged down in, like, the intricacies, then I think you've got, like, a tighter plot and something more interesting to watch. Yeah. Right? Like, I guess I would compare this with, like, the Silmarillion of Lord of the Rings. Like,
I don't know. Yeah. Hodor.
Good. Yep. Basically, it's like, if you want to get...
Game of Thrones, not Lord of the Rings.
Hodor is his generic. This is a popular thing I should know about, but don't actually know about it.
That's fair.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just like, if, like, I don't know, print the Star Wars encyclopedia and have like timelines and the rules of the banking clan and all that stuff, and then people who are really into that can like read it and have a fantastic time, and I won't judge them at all. But yeah, like you're saying, to put it into like a TV show which is ostensibly aimed at children, maybe not the best choice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is like the question of where's the money coming from for this war is exactly the kind of question that like College Humor makes 15-minute videos on, right? And fans love to speculate on it, and you can just let them fill in like whatever they want to fill in into the space. But once you, as like the canonical storyteller, try to fill it in, there's too much. There's too much there for you to be able to tell an adequate story of what the heck is going on with banks in this galaxy.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense.
It will also, and I'm not getting paid any money for Disney Plus here. This is just kind of my own random shill. I am starting to really appreciate what Disney Plus is doing, because I feel like, you know, part of the problem is when there's not very much content. Like with Star Wars, you know, there was one movie every couple of years and one TV show, and it sort of had to be all things for all people. And the same thing with the MCU. But I think kind of what first started with the Netflix MCU universe and now is really happening on Disney Plus, there's more of an idea of like, we can make shows that are more niche that a certain part of the larger fandom will love and maybe not all, and that's okay. You know, so WandaVision is kind of one particular part of a fandom, and Falcon and Winter Soldier is another, and I think with the upcoming Star Wars TV shows we'll get the same. Like the Bad Batch will be kind of really great for one part of the fandom. I mean, I'm kind of excited about all of them because I'm just a overall Star Wars guy, but like, you know, and my point being, like, I think you could have a show that was like a, you know, legal bureaucratic drama set in like the, you know, the political bureaucratic world of Coruscant during any of these time periods. And the people who want to watch X-Wings and TIE Fighters blow each other up would probably not love that. It may not be great for kids, but some part of the fandom would love that. And it'd be a great time to explore that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just off the top of my head, I came up with a title.
Oh, yeah?
The Wookiee of Wall Street.
The Wookiee of
I
Wall
like
Street.
it. I like it. I like it.
Wow.
I think it's going in a slightly different direction, but hey, that could get us more to the HBO direction. So, you know, that's fine too. Speaking of, though, let's talk about the romances in this episode, because...
What romance?
I think let me just start out by saying, is it fair to say that Padme Amidala, among her many, many skills, has atrociously bad taste in men?
Yeah,
because
I mean...
I think Anakin wins the which one is more toxic war, but Clovis gives him a run for his money.
Sure, and like I've been Padme. I sympathize. I get this. Yeah.
Oh, where do you want to start, Sarah?
Oh gosh.
Should we start with Clovis and then we can get into Anakin?
Sure. Yeah, let's start with Clovis. So Clovis and Padme used to date. I don't think they explicitly say that, but it's like heavily hinted at that they were in a romantic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That's why she calls him by his last name.
Yeah, as you do. Maybe his name works differently. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Words, it's fine. But yeah, and she's very much like, hello, friend Clovis. I'm glad to be your friend, and it's nice that we're friends now. You're my friend. And he's like, cool. Are you dating Anakin? And she's like, no, I am not. Jedi aren't allowed to date. That would be bad. And he's like, that would be bad. That would be bad if you're dating Anakin. And they're like, he's like taking her back to his place, and they're going on this caper to find these secret banking files. And eventually Palpatine assigns Padme to go with Clovis to keep digging through this banking stuff, which I think like Palpatine 100% does on purpose to piss off Anakin.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
easily. And like Anakin is so pissed that even Yoda senses it.
Yoda gives him a look.
Yeah. And so they go to the opera together as part of their disguise. I don't know. So,
Well, very important discussions always happen at the opera.
Yeah, you
in
know.
Star Wars.
We've already established in the second movie that the best way to have two people who shouldn't be in a romantic relationship together but are trying to be secretive is send them on the most romantic bachelor type dates you can possibly imagine, as happened with Anakin and Padme in the second movie. So like, we've established a pattern here. You know, you're trying to be subtle. You get dressed up in a really nice dress and go to the opera with a guy. That's what happens.
Yeah.
Then you go to a pool party, and then it's
Well,
just
Obi-Wan also senses it too, because he comes and has more than a look. He has a talk with Anakin. And this is like this is the scene.
Well, I want to get to that, but can we just focus on Clovis for a little bit more and then,
sure.
go to the Anakin stuff?
I have a huge rant, and I'm like shaking. Yeah, so they go back to this hotel room. I don't even know where they are, post-opera. And Padme is like, okay, Clovis, let's get down to business and talk about business things. And Clovis is like, instead, why don't I talk about how you're not involved with Anakin and put my arm around you? And she's like, I'm not involved with Anakin. I don't know why you would think that. And he's like, well, if you're not involved with Anakin, that means I get to make out with you right now.
Ugh.
And he like forces himself on her, and she's saying like, no, Clovis, no. And then Anakin bursts in, obviously. But just like,
Yeah, it's like a classic model of toxic masculinity where the woman's consent and opinion don't matter. Like, it only matters that there's not another man here to defend you from me.
Yeah, it's
Right.
such... And I try not to swear. Get your bleeper ready. It's such bullshit, and I'm so pissed off about it. Because, like, okay, I think I'm, like, extra triggered because I've been in this, like, exact same situation. Maybe not this exact same situation. You know,
With
when
a
you're
Jedi.
with a Jedi and you're, like, trying to expose this banking clan's evil machinations. No, but, like, where I was... like with a dude who I was like, hello, we are friends. We're going to go to this concert as friends. 100% that's what it is. Not you. God, no, not you. Sorry, Riki pointed at himself. And after the concert, he's like, you're not dating anyone. And I was like, well, no, I'm not interested in anyone. He's like, well, then kiss me right now. And like grabbed me and tried to kiss me. And Jesus. I was just like pushing him off me forcibly and just repeating no over and over again. And like the fact that I'm not dating anyone, therefore I have to kiss you, like that's just bullshit. And it's like exactly what Clovis is pulling. And then he like loses any sort of sympathy for me from this point onward. Like, you're there on a mission. It's not like Padme wanted to go to the opera with you, right? Like some dude ordered her to go to the opera with you. That's why she's there. She's made it explicit that she wants to be your friend and she thinks of you as a friend and is not romantically interested in you. Yeah. And the fact that she's not dating Anakin, therefore she should kiss you, is just like the most utterly ridiculous bullshit and makes me so angry. And yeah, it just like gives Padme no agency. She's a gosh darn senator, right? Like she's a powerful, important woman. Even if she wasn't, even if she was just like some random lady, the reason she doesn't have to kiss you is because she doesn't like you. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, Clovis. Go away. Yeah. The end.
Yeah. And then Anakin bursts in because the door was not locked.
And sees this, so obviously he's like, get off of her, which, yes, that's the correct answer. She's saying no and pushing him away. But then he goes and starts beating up Clovis, and Padme's like, stop this right now. This is not how I want you to defend me. And he tells her, like, shut up, stay out of this.
Yeah.
Which is just like extra stupid and the worst.
And he gets Clovis on the ground and like is straddling him and doing like the repeated face punches of like, I've lost control of myself.
Yeah.
And like, he's not mad because Padme's been assaulted. He's mad because some other dude took his prize.
Yeah. And just sticking on Clovis for one more second, I think, to me, I'm really glad you told that story. Like, it's not something I've experienced, but I think I can definitely imagine like why it is so screwed up. And I think that's part of why it's so hard to watch in the show, especially because what then happens later. And I'm not sure if Padme believes this or if she's just trying to mollify Anakin, but either way, it's incredibly awful. Like, she kind of says to Anakin, like, yes, he kissed me and I shouldn't have let that. Like, she takes some of the blame for that. And I'm just like, no, Padme, you don't have to do this. This is totally Clovis being an asshole. So, I share the anger there. And then, did you get a feeling at one point that Clovis was also kind of... It felt to me like not only was he trying to make sure that they weren't together...
He was blackmailing her?
Yes, 100%. It felt like he was kind of being like, I think you're together, but if you're not together, you should kiss me. So now, like, you kind of have to kiss me to prove that you're not with him. Like, and it just felt so slimy and awful in so many ways.
And then after Anakin beats him up... Captain Typho comes in and it's like, is everything okay, Senator? And Clovis pulls the, like I was attacked by random attackers and they have fled on a speeder. Isn't that right, General Skywalker? And you know, pulls that kind of blackmail on Skywalker of like, I'm not going to rat you out, so now you have to be nice to me.
Right, for sure. Okay, well, so sorry I kept holding you back. I just wanted to talk about the two of them separately. Now let's talk about Anakin, because I think as we're getting into, and Sarah especially, I want to hear your thoughts on this, all three of us, Anakin's behavior here is not really the best either.
No. So he's upset when he finds out. So, very beginning of this arc, Padme's shown up on Scipio, and Clovis is there, and she's just like, oh, hey, what are you doing here? Traitor? ? And... like, they go on this caper together. Anakin finds out about it and is pissed. So he comes to break Padme out, not break Padme out of jail. He comes to bail Padme out of jail. And, like, she's legally released into his custody. And we get a very, like, I'm Luke Skywalker, I'm here to rescue you scene set up, which is nice. Except it's more like, I'm your husband, I am very mad at you for hanging around with a boy you used to date.
It felt so patronizing. You know, it felt like some awful 1950s, like, Lucy, you got in trouble again kind of nonsense.
Or even, like, does he love Lucy? This is not even, like, let's not go there. That's the whole title of the show, Matthew. It felt like he was her father and, like, reprimanding her.
Yeah. And
he even says at one point, like, I should just leave you here. Well, I can't, because, like, you're released to my custody, so come on. And, is, like, chastising her. And
when Palpatine assigns Padme to work with Clovis... Anakin, after the meeting, is like, as your husband, I demand that you turn this assignment down.
Oh, he's like, I order you to turn it down. Yeah. Which is like, no. 100% no. Like, and what really upsets me is, like, I think Anakin does have due course to be upset about Padme and Clovis hanging out. Like, clearly... Clovis is putting the moves on Padme and is a skeevy guy who's ends up assaulting her, right? I think, like, Anakin is right to be like, I don't like this dude, and it bothers me that you're hanging out with him. But the way that he goes about it is just, like, this petty jealousy of, I don't like boys playing with my toys when they're mine.
Yeah.
And, like, if he would have just gone to his wife and been like, hey, darling... this guy makes me uncomfortable. I really don't want you spending time with him. Could you please ask Palpatine to, like, put somebody else on this case? It would just make me feel a lot more comfortable. I just don't trust this one guy. Like, I love and trust you, but it just gives me the ickies, right? And then I think that would be like a reasonable request from Anakin, but that is not at all what happens.
I think that's so true. You're right. He has reason not to trust her, both because he's kind of slimy towards her, but also, I mean, he's been proven to betray the Republic.
Yeah.
Like, And I mean, he does in this. Like, he delivers her to Dooku, which is like, I mean, I'm not in any way minimizing like the personal stuff he does with her. That's also awful. But also, like, yeah, he's awful. But I think what you're saying is so important, because to me the key thing is that not only does Anakin never like just explain his feelings, he never gives her a chance. He never listens to her. Mm-hmm. That whole scene where he's breaking he's bailing her out of the prison, basically. She keeps saying, like, look, I need to explain this to you. This is a complex situation. I can't do it here. And he just has no interest in hearing it. He's no interest in giving her any agency at all. He has no interest in the idea that there might be a reason why she's doing this. It's just, oh, you're dumb and terrible, and you're being manipulated by this evil guy. I see him as evil. And to me, I think it stands in such stark contrast, because, like, I was saying before about the political machination, she's a very savvy person. Mm-hmm. She can see manipulation happening. She knows what's going on, and he just gives her none of that credit.
No, and he's, like, violent about it, too. Like, angry and yelling at her. And I feel like, despite her being so politically savvy, like, it feels very real, her just trying to, like, calm him down. It's like you were saying about taking blame for the situation with Clovis, where like he was trying to kiss her. It seemed like she's just playing defense, right? She's just trying to get Anakin to calm down so that he stops yelling. And like, I mean, we know the guy that Anakin turns into, right? This idea of trying to pacify him doesn't seem like the wrong move. It just, it's unfortunate that she got caught up with this guy.
Yeah, we talked about this arc being removed from season 4, and I think that was the correct move, because Anakin doesn't make sense like in this mode in season 4, whereas here in season 6 we're closer to the end. I think it fits more naturally. Like, his anger feels more natural, whereas I think if we had seen this in season 4, it would have been more shocking.
Yeah.
The way he attacks Clovis and the way he acts towards Padme.
Well, especially because, I mean, I think one of the most important parts of it is, at the end of it, Padme walks away from him. She says, like, I don't feel safe. I don't feel like you trust me. She makes a lot of really good points about how the things that allow a relationship to build trust, the togetherness, the being able to share things, the being able to scene with other people, they can't do any of this because of the secretness of the relationship. And she says, Anakin, like, I need space. I need to not talk to you for a while. And in some ways, to me, like, you'd have to have redone some parts of Revenge of the Sith, unfortunately. But, like, to me, if Anakin's already in a place where he feels like he might lose her, then a lot of his actions in Revenge of the Sith, of being so paranoid about her dying and of losing her in another way, you know, and then maybe it's a, like, you know, okay, well, she's pregnant, so that's why she's kind of coming back to him, or you know, there's 8 million ways you could spin that, but, like, to me, that would have felt like such a better transition. Because you're right, if to me, this is him getting very close to the dark side, and if he's that in season 4, then you're especially like, Padme, what are you doing with him in seasons 5 and 6, let alone in the movie that comes after?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, it's also important to realize that, like, I don't think Anakin's witnessed a functional marriage.
Yeah, I think it's very true.
Ever, right? I mean, the Jedi are purposefully anti-marriage, anti-romantic relationships, romantic ties, even though Obi-Wan does give him the, like, this stuff happens, you know, I like Satine.
Right. And his mother had an immaculate conception. There was never any kind of father figure.
Yeah, which... Oh, gosh.
I have a lot of feelings on that, too, but that's another story.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. But yeah, he never saw his mom with anyone. She was just a single mom as a slave, right? And even, like, I don't think he's even seen, like, a functional, just, like, couple existing. He's got no role model to work with here, right? He's just working on this, like, repressed anger and repressed jealousy. And that's not to, like, excuse any of his behavior, because it's terrible. But yeah, it's just like, it kind of feels like this is what these are the seeds the Jedi have sown.
Yeah, it's that idea of, like, explaining but not excusing, you know. And it's kind of in Falcon the Winter Soldier, I don't want to get into any spoilers, but there's been discussion of, like, what does it mean to be a truly terrible person, but also to, like, get to see the things that make you a terrible person, and to have, like, a bit of sympathy while also thinking they're a monster, and also blaming the people who made them into a monster while also blaming them for being a monster. I feel like we're getting a lot of that here. And Riki, you started to talk about this when I wanted to keep calling on Clovis, but I'll give you a chance now. As you point out, both Yoda and also Obi-Wan kind of sense what's going on in Anakin. Talk about that some.
Well, during the meeting with Palpatine, Yoda gives a look when it's announced that Padme will work with Clovis. Anakin noticeably seethes, and Yoda just turns to him. And then afterwards, Obi-Wan comes to talk to Anakin in his room, and gives you understand Jedi can't have attachments,
right.
Your feelings for Padme, you can't have those. If she wants to be with Clovis, you have to let her. And the detail I wanted to bring up specifically was that he mentions Satine, and he says, "You've met Satine," and talks about his feelings towards her.
Right.
And I noticed that because the dialogue made it sound like Satine was still alive, because again, season 4. If this were placed, properly in the chronology, he probably should have said you met Satine, past tense.
Right.
But the way he talks about it is still an ongoing thing. But still important for this conversation.
I mean, it was nice to have both Yoda and Obi-Wan finally acknowledge that and say look, I see that there's feelings going on here.
So
I think. Oh, go ahead, Sarah. I was just talking about why it frustrated me, but yeah, you go first.
Well, I was just gonna say about Yoda, when he gives this look, it seems he knows that Anakin is pissed because Clovis and Padme are together, but at the end of the episode, he seems to talk you were right about Clovis. So does Yoda sense the romantic relationship, or does he just sense Anakin being not okay with this because he thinks Clovis is a traitor, not necessarily because he thinks Clovis is going to make moves on his woman?
That's how they play it off.
But do you think he actually knows?
Yeah, I feel like Obi-Wan was not acting independently when he went to talk to Anakin.
Yeah. I got the feeling that it was a kind of nuanced thing. There was basically saying yes, because what he says is yes, you were right, but not all is as it seems, and that you're being He basically calls him out for being selfish and says not all is as it seems. And what I kind of got for that was he was saying yes, Clovis was a shady character, but you as a Jedi were supposed to notice Clovis as being part of this separatist plot, not just, having jealous feelings about him, and that's because you're losing focus. And so he was kind of trying to be you were technically right here, but you were still in the wrong, and that helped him see that.
Yeah, right for the wrong reasons kind of thing.
Yeah. What I was going to say, though, is I think the Obi-Wan stuff, again, to me, that makes total sense here in Season 6. Although, as you say, Riki, you have to kind of headcanon a bit the language to understand that Satine is now dead. But because, again, in the same way that if Anakin has fallen this far, but everyone is just okay with it for 3 more seasons, I have real trouble with the idea that this early, Obi-Wan knows what's happening between him and Padme and doesn't intervene more in seasons 5, 6, and 7. And again, maybe that's another reason why they took it out, is because they were this doesn't really fit in some things, and it kind of fits in 6, but it is honestly something I'm very much hopeful that the TV show that's coming, Kenobi, will explore a little bit more, because we know that Ben feels like he really failed Anakin and that he couldn't teach him, and A New Hope doesn't quite line up with the prequels and the way it's phrased, but that's fine. We can hand wave some of that. But I would love to hear him talk more about the specific ways he thinks he failed, and that maybe one of them is that because he sort of didn't want to have Anakin get hurt the way he'd gotten hurt over Satine, that he maybe was a little bit too lenient about him and Padme, and that he now blames him. That's one of the things he thinks he did wrong.
Yeah, or sort of this living vicariously through Anakin, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I can't make him. I want someone to be happy if I couldn't be, and then later he's oh nope, that was a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so too. That'd be interesting. I want to see more Satine as well, but I don't know I don't think the timeline works for that, does it? Have we been told when the Kenobi?
I think it's supposed to be set sometime while Luke is like, 8 to 10 to 12 kind of thing.
Okay, so probably no Satine unless we get flashbacks, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't think she can become a Force ghost.
I did read the Kenobi novel.
Oh yeah, what'd you think?
First half was way too slow, maybe understandably so because they had to introduce all of the characters on Tatooine. But the second half really slaps. It was. I thought it was good.
Yeah, well, we're going to do a review of that. Maybe I can get you on for that. But I think you see what I mean about how that deals a lot with Kenobi's guilt and his like trying to come to terms with stuff.
Yeah.
Also, I just love what they did with the Sand People. Or I should call them Tusken Raiders because that's kind of the point. And really telling their story as indigenous people who are misunderstood, and that the people on Tatooine are basically colonizers. And I just love that part of the story.
I think if you're going to review the Kenobi novel, you should probably also go and look into reading the comics that deal with Sharad Het, the Jedi that they reference.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'll definitely do that. So any other last little things about this episode? I think one thing I wanted to mention, just a fun little moment, is right after Padme basically breaks up with Anakin, she's walking out and, one of the security guards comes back and says, is everything all right? And she just says no and walks past him. And I just felt so bad for him in that moment. I was like, oof, that poor guy.
Yeah.
My last detail is when Anakin fails to save Clovis, what happened to the Force?
Yeah.
Like, we have seen Ahsoka try to lift two people at the same time and only failed because she got shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a scene in the first Harry Potter books, which their author is extraordinarily problematic. But there's a scene where, like, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are in trouble, and Harry and Ron are, like, trapped in some vines, and Hermione is like, oh no, how do I make a fire? I don't have matches. I don't have a lighter. What am I going to do? And they're like, you're a witch, use magic. Yeah. So I feel like it's conceivable that Anakin's just like, oh gosh, I got to hold my wife in one hand and this douche canoe in the other. Oh no, I can't hold them. They're very heavy and they're slipping and I don't want my wife to die. And just kind of like forgetting that would be a thing that he could do.
Yeah, I think he, air quotes, forgot he could lift Clovis with the Force.
I think it might be because, I mean, I will say it does feel like the Force is exactly as powerful as the plot wants it to be, and it's maddeningly inconsistent. But I do think also what Riki is saying there of like, I think Anakin sort of felt like, by normal standards, I won't be able to save Clovis's life. Oh, well.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Darn. Yeah. But the Force isn't magic, Matthew.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to that in a minute, along with one more romance plot. But no, the one thing I was going to say is, I think the first time I watched this, I had maybe been somewhat protected by this particular form of toxic masculinity. Again, because I'm not the men I have dated, I haven't dealt with this from. It is, I think, somewhat of a straight male toxicity, but I'm sure it can happen in any masculine person. But I kind of was like, oh, this feels so cartoonish. Recently, as part of my need for escape during this awful year we've had, my partner Mary and I have spent a lot of time watching reality TV dating shows, which are all bad. But it's one of these ones where like a bunch of people are all in a house together and they're all kind of like trying to mix and match dating. And I mean, it's an awful show, and I've learned more things about the terrible producers of it, and was not watching it anymore. But the point is, the amount of just ridiculous, like, a guy and a girl are dating, and then the woman is like paired with another guy for a game, and it's not in her control. They just have to do it, and he gets horribly jealous because she's like, I can't believe you talked to him during that. You should have just ignored him because you're with me. Like, it was, and I know they had exaggerated it for reality TV, but it happens so often with so many people. And then like seeing the things that these contestants do on their like social media once they get back home. Yes, I got obsessed. I'm just like, okay, no. Anakin is a real, like, that is a thing that people actually do, and it's, oh my god. I knew the jealousy could be awful, but like the level of non-subtle toxicity he shows was just like, yep, I've seen that in dating shows. I know that's real.
I have been in that relationship more than once. Like, yeah, it's 100% a real thing. And it's horrifying. And I think Padme's reaction of just like, honestly, the thing I find least believable is that Padme says we need to take a break, and Anakin's like, okay.
Yeah. And there's never a scene we see in seasons 5 or 6 where they kind of like get back together, right? So I'm guessing because they didn't air these, they felt they didn't have to. There was no need to show them like reconnecting.
I guess, or maybe if there was some sort of reconnection thing, they axed it or like edited it out.
Yeah. I don't remember if it comes later in season 6. I don't think it does. So then it makes it all the more like, how did we get from this to them having a baby and being super excited about it together? But
I vaguely remember something, but I could be totally wrong.
We'll get to that. Sarah, do you have any other last things about this episode?
I just want to like maybe yell again a little more. No, that's it. Okay. That's about it.
That's fair.
It's just like noise of frustration.
Also, I think to be clear, when I talked about like now I believe it, like I don't mean to any means like discount stories like Sarah what you're telling. I think just with my particular friends, I have not been close to someone who's experienced this. I'm sure I've known many people who have. I just hadn't heard those stories.
Oh yeah, that's not what. That's not the impression I got at all. Yeah,
just wanted to be careful about that language because I think it's. I think there could be a dangerous trope of someone being like, oh, I watched this TV show and suddenly I realized that racism is around and all their like people of color around them are like, oh, we've been yelling at you for 20 years. Anyway,
yeah.
So let's go on to another romance plot we get.
Let's not.
No, but this time it's not it's a different kind of toxicity because if there's any much of a romantic lead who's a different kind than Anakin Skywalker, it would be Jar Jar Binks. We get romantic lead Jar Jar Binks.
Whew.
So the story of the disappeared. I think those 3 episodes I don't like, but I feel like they introduce some really interesting things. These 2 episodes have so much potential and then screw it up so much that they make me really mad. The others make me mad too, but for different reasons. So anyway, these episodes start on the peaceful world of Bardata, which again seems to be one of these, like, they're kind of part of the Republic, but not really. They find themselves threatened by an ancient prophecy. Their spiritual leaders are one by one vanishing. And we find that this world has, like, it's a very spiritual world. They have a very strong connection to the Force. And they're very kind of like a mystical people. And so their representative in the Senate asks for help. But their queen is very clear that there's only one person who she will possibly accept help from, Jar Jar Binks. And the Senate is like, yeah, and the Jedi especially are like, no, that we're not okay with that. We're going to at least send Mace Windu. Because why the Senate gets involved in this, why the Jedi get involved in this, I'm not quite sure. But fine. But also, when you're talking about a people who are deeply distrustful of the Jedi, and you want to send someone who is not super arrogant and pushy and will tell everyone that he's right because he's a Jedi and everyone else is wrong, Mace Windu doesn't seem like my first choice, but enough. Let me stop editorializing. We'll talk about that.
Well, who would be your first choice? Who would you send?
Shakti.
Ahsoka.
Yeah.
I think Ahsoka has like a proven track record of like working with people, or like Shakti, or I think there's most of the honestly non-male Jedi are pretty good about this.
Plo Koon, I think you could send Plo Koon or Master Mundi.
Yeah, I think they could be decent options as well.
Kit Fisto. Because then he can be the romantic.
Then you get a romance that people can be happy about. But so anyway, so Jar Jar Binks and him get there, and there's lots of shenanigans, and Mace Windu almost immediately starts proving them right about the why they don't like the Jedi. And then here again, like, great content in the midst of awfulness, we learned that why they don't like the Jedi is because they think that, it used to be that they had, because they're so Force sensitive, a lot of their children were becoming Jedi, and they basically saw the Jedi as kidnappers, which, plot twist, they are.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I love that they mentioned that, and that's a legitimate reason they don't trust the Jedi, and it's kind of dropped. But so anyway, there's plot, there's shenanigans. We find out that this like secret cult is trying to bring back darkness. We don't get much about why it makes sense, although we do get, as I wrote in my notes, it is interesting that in a story about Jar Jar Binks, the portrayal of the Gungan is not the most racist portrayal of a race of people. Because the amount of like, oh, they're aboriginals doing rituals with fancy mat is just appallingly racist in these episodes. But yeah, so there's chases and there's figuring out, and then we learn that I forget her. I think it's Tanslin.
Mother Talzin?
Mother Talzin. That's it. Thank you, Mother Talzin.
Tanzin? Oh my gosh. Talzin. Okay. All right. Yeah.
The Night Sister, who we thought had kind of sort of disappeared, but I guess maybe because if this is also supposed to be in a different part of the chronology, not sure. But anyway, she's actually been behind this. All the stuff that they're doing is to serve her plot, and she confronts Mace Windu, and there's this fascinating discussion that could be really good about like the difference between magic versus using the Force. But again, it's kind of like the banking stuff that like they go just into it enough to make you start asking questions and then realize that none of it makes sense and none of it's consistent with even itself, let alone what else they've told us. But they have to do everything, and Jar Jar Binks and Mace Windu together save the day. They drive off the cult. They save the Queen. And at the end, the Queen's like, you know what? Maybe we should trust the Jedi after all.
Yeah, unless they start kidnapping our kids again.
Yeah.
In which case... No,
which
yeah.
they will.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what do we think about and did I miss anything? Get anything wrong? I'm sure I did.
You missed the boning between Jar Jar and the Queen.
Oh, yeah, no, I kept talking up the romance and didn't mention it, probably. Yeah, we find out that the Queen and Jar Jar have been, bombad pals for a long time.
Oh, gosh. That's not what that means, I'm pretty sure.
Bombad means nothing. It's like...
Because he also describes Mace Windu as their bombad pals.
And
so
also,
either we're introducing bisexuality and polyamory into the Jedi world, which I'm all for, or it's just a meaningless phrase.
Bombad is just an
he's like
adjective.
A bombad warrior, but it doesn't mean any. It just means like extreme. I feel like
I think it's kind of the like in California it would be bitchin'. In Boston, oh god, I can't remember it now. Wicked. Yeah. It's but anyway, we find out that they knew each other like many years ago. I guess this is like when at first I was like, how would Jar Jar have met her when he was a lowlife on his planet? He's been a representative for like a couple decades now. Mm-hmm. Maybe they met through some Senate thing. Who the hell knows? But yeah, and clearly, and at first it's like, oh, so maybe there's a thing, maybe there's not. But Jar Jar's like, nope, and he just goes in and gives her a deep kiss in front of like all the people.
Well, she kisses him.
Oh no, you're right. That is correct. Thank you.
But still, it's like, oh yeah.
And then later Mace is like, Jar Jar, where were you all night?
Yeah. And he was just like, I was catching up with my old pal. Yeah, I mean...
Well, I think he even says, like... I'm not going to do the accent because it's deeply offensive. But, like, me and the Queen are in love. And we were... I don't think he says making love, but, like, implies it.
It's the closest thing to that we've had on this TV show yet so far.
Yeah. And Padme gets pregnant. Yeah.
Jar Jar deserves love.
Jar Jar does deserve love. But I don't know. There's something uncomfortable about, like, because Mace describes him earlier in the episode, which is also a real jerk move, as like having the mind of a child, and like putting your character with the mind of a child into a sexual romantic relationship.
It's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're supposed to think that Mace was wrong there. I think that was supposed to be a kind of like Mace being like very judgmental of someone who doesn't have the intelligence that he does and in ways that he recognizes, but that is still like, to me, I don't feel have you guys seen The Good Place?
Yeah.
I feel like Jar Jar Binks has like the mind of Jason from The Good Place.
Jason Mendoza, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You take that back. Bortles.
Oh yeah, okay, thank you.
Bortles, yeah.
Yeah, but so like I don't think it's supposed to in like a kind of like he's too young to consent or anything like that. But it's like he's an immature idiot is more like where I think he's coming from. But yeah, it was definitely still super uncomfortable. And I remember I actually wrote in the notes at one point she says, "Jar Jar, come meditate with me."
Yeah.
And it's very much like wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
well, that's all we have to say about these episodes.
The end. No.
No? Okay, fine.
Yeah, well, it's... Okay, so...
Well, let me just say one good thing,
sure.
I guess. I keep using terms about live action stuff, but the sets were very nice. Mm-hmm. Strong, like Indiana Jones vibes.
Oh yeah.
Like Crystal Skull Chamber, Temple of Doom, mixed with a little bit of, I felt, Big Trouble in Little China, the way there was like a dragon head with crackling green like electricity on it. Mm-hmm. So that was all very pretty, and yeah, now we can talk about how racist some of the depictions were.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the comparison to Temple of Doom, right? Like,
Yeah.
like what Matthew was saying at the beginning of this discussion, how this like tribalist, it seems very like Kalima at parts, and I think like they come so close to touching on this idea of like Mace Windu has like this very like down his nose look towards magic, because magic isn't the Force, which is better than magic. Right. It's like, my dude, your sword is powered by a magic crystal. The Force is just magic, friend. And it feels like they very purposefully gave the Queen an Indian accent, and she's played by an Indian actress. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of like differing religions, differing spiritualities, as like this sort of like hegemonic branch of Christianity, where it's like very, very extreme and thinks like our religion is the only good one, and like Hinduism or Buddhism or any of those other approaches to religion are somehow primitive, or don't make sense. And I think like we get really close to touching on this difference, but just like swerve away at the end.
Yeah, I mean, like Riki and I just had a conversation about that very theme of how in The Last Jedi, one of the things that Luke talks about is that the Jedi became so arrogant because they thought they were the only ones who had access to the Force. And to me, what Mace Windu does in these episodes, perfectly explains Luke's attitude towards the Jedi in The Last Jedi.
Yeah,
you know?
I was there too.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
It's all good.
Wow.
But maybe our listeners weren't, so.
That's very possible. My apologies there.
It's all good.
I feel, anyway, I can't possibly excuse that. But yeah, so that seems like such an important thing. But you're right, like they get close to it and then just, let me say one other thing on like the Aboriginal like racism here, and then let's talk about the magic system. Because Riki, I love what both of you are saying about how like there's a lot of beauty in how the people are portrayed at first, and the first half of the episodes where it's just about like the actual people there, the leadership, it felt like it was, like a lot of Clone Wars. There was some like kind of racially uncomfortable stuff about how they're being depicted, but some felt more respectful than a lot of others. It's when they got go ahead if you want to interrupt that. If you want to.
Well, as Sarah mentioned, the Queen was played by a person of the ethnicity that is kind of being mirrored here. The weird thing is another one of the primary actors of the what race are they?
I want to say Bombadil, but that's not it. I just said it a few minutes ago.
Tom Bombadil.
Bardata.
Bardadans. Okay,
Yeah.
so one of the other primary Bardadans is played by a Japanese voice actor. So it was a little weird to me that they had kind of different ethnicities and accents going on, but at least it was not white people putting on bad accents.
Right, and that's for sure. And what I was just going on though is that it's when they introduce this cult, which I think Sarah, I was thinking the exact same thing. It's very much Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom, the thuggy cult that they show, which is just like it's all like drums chanting and ridiculous, drums beating and chanting and masks and like there's ways to each of those things could be elements of something respectful, but instead it's just like every bad fever dream of like Aboriginal dark magic, or Hindi dark magic or stuff like that, and it's just so offensive and terrible.
Yeah, and like you're saying, there's, I think, wholly legitimate ways to portray it's like a group of, like, in religious worship with, like, drum beating, chanting, mask wearing, all that stuff as, like, a very legitimate religious practice that happens all across the world. But yeah, this was definitely, it was portrayed in a very insensitive way, like you're saying, like it's the like, ooh, voodoo cult magic, stay away.
Well, the masks themselves seemed ripped directly from like African inspired masks, right? I mean, I'm not an anthropologist, I don't know the specific tribes, but we've seen like that type of the diamond shape mask, like very tall.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's true. I think there were some elements that I've seen as kind of like connected to like Polynesian or Australian Aboriginal traditions. I don't mean that they actually refer to things actual. I mean in like bad movie portrayals of those things. What I've seen.
I was thinking of,
but yeah, African sounds also legitimate.
The thing I was thinking of was like the mask character from Crash Bandicoot, who like his name is not Ooga Booga, but that's what my sister and I called him because that's the sound that happens when he pops out, and I feel like that in and of itself kind of like encapsulates maybe that wasn't the most like gracious portrayal. But yeah, it like that's very much what it reminded me of.
Yeah,
I agree with you. The sort of like Polynesian-ish vibe.
Yeah,
in a tiki kitsch sense, not in a like actual Polynesian religion sense.
Yeah, and I think I went into this feeling like the show is being very inconsistent in terms of like, is magic from the Force or is it not? But I feel like you actually gave a good way to square that circle of like it when May says like it's not magic isn't real. It's his arrogance of saying like only the Force is only our understanding of the Force and
only my magic is real.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminded me actually of this is kind of an obscure reference, but I've made it before, so hopefully and I'll try to explain it. The role playing game Mage the Ascension, which is part of the World of Darkness by White Wolf, a company that has also had some very good material and some incredibly racist. But in this magic world, what they basically have the idea of is that there is this like just thing in the universe called quintessence. It's like the essence of all magic, and people can do magic by channeling it, but that most human minds can't conceive of just like the otherworldly like openness of it, like just complete mind-bendingness of it. And so the reason that there's different kinds of magic in like, the different like groups of magicians you can be part of in the role-playing game, like classes, is because different groups each have to build like a metaphor to understand this magic. And that, so there's a group that are kind of like science mages who think this is just like a scientific thing they can study. And then there's like religious mages. And then there's like, sort of monk mages who channel it through like meditation and martial arts, and hermetic mages who think you can like channel it through like arcane, arcane like formulas and stuff like that. And part of the game is like that there's different groups of people who some are open to the idea of like, this is just our metaphor, other metaphors make sense. And some are like, no, this is the truth, it's not a metaphor. And to me, that's now how I'm kind of seeing this idea of the Force, is that like the Jedi and some of the Sith, but especially the Jedi, have long thought that like they are the only ones who draw upon this, and have written off that there are people like the Night Sisters or other groups out, or this Bendadas, who all have some degree of Force sensitivity or using the Force in some ways, just in ways that Mace Windu and the Jedi don't recognize.
Yeah, totally. And like you said, we touched on this in The Last Jedi live cast as well, where like Luke's explanation of like the Force is just this thing that permeates all living beings, and the Jedi are tapping into it in one way to use it,
right,
as the Jedi do, is like, yeah, makes sense. And then I could definitely see, especially like it makes sense that they have sent Mace along on this journey, because like story-wise, I guess, not internally but externally, because I think Mace being the one who's like, that is magic is an illusion, I'm using the Force is not magic and therefore real and therefore better, like he seems like the perfect guy to be saying that.
Yeah, if you want a story about the arrogance of the Jedi, Mace Windu is who you send.
Yeah, I wrote here, so yeah, you brought up the point of like magic is only an illusion, and my comment was like, also the Force is just magic. Come on, Mace.
Yeah.
Your sword is powered by a magic crystal.
Yeah.
I was proud of that line.
Very much so. So what else? Any other thoughts either on this magic and Force stuff or other stuff about the episodes?
Riki, you had a fun fact.
Oh, about the writer? Yeah. So the credited writer on these two episodes is J.W. Rinsler, who is actually quite prolific in the Star Wars world as a writer and editor of guides and reference books and stuff, and art books on Star Wars. So very prominent. But the interesting thing is, apparently in interviews after the fact, he has very much distanced himself from these episodes and has claimed that George Lucas approached him about this story idea and wanted to, quote, rehabilitate Jar Jar Binks. And then also, Rinsler also has said that basically, like, what ended up as these episodes is not very close at all to the script that he had submitted. So it seems to me like if I were to, like, kind of read between the lines, it seems like these were written by George Lucas.
Yeah.
And Rinsler is credited and is kind of like taking the fall.
Yeah, that seems highly possible. It
seems like a Lucas arc, right? Like we've talked about the racism, which seems very much out of place with where we've ended up in the show, but is very consistent with the prequels and how we feel about those.
Yeah. I think that's very likely, and as well as, and I know there's a lot of sort of interviews with cast members and writers and stuff that are coming more and more onto Disney Plus, and I want to watch more of them. But from the ones I've seen and what I've understood, like, as well as just everything else about like the making of these movies, George Lucas is a very brilliant man. Obviously, he came up with a story that like we all love so much and treasure, and also had a lot of flaws. And one of them was he's incredibly stubborn when it comes to storytelling, and it feels like, for whatever reason, like he thought the world would love Jar Jar Binks, and he just was never open to the idea that maybe this character that maybe in his mind like works really well just wasn't translated. And I know I've heard from some people say like they love Jar Jar Binks as a kid, but even like, you know, some studies have shown, or even just like an anecdotal, like even that, like a lot of kids did not like Jar Jar Binks either. And certainly, and the degree to which like Lucas just in every movie and this show kept being like, no, I will get you to like Jar Jar Binks. Like this time I'll get you like, you know, this time I'll get you to like Jar Jar Binks. And just, you can't rehabilitate this character. It's just awful. Like racist, stupid, offensive, not interesting, not funny.
Yeah,
like
Deus Ex Machina, like the way that he solves problems is by pratfalling and like somehow the enemies are defeated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there is like a fun fan theory that like Jar Jar Binks is a Sith and he's using like sort of drunken master Jedi magic, and I feel like that is the story you need to tell if you want to rehabilitate Jar Jar. This idea of him as like having sex is not the way to go about it. I do think so. I was one of the kids who like loved Jar Jar.
Yeah, and all for that. I don't want to like minimize that experience.
No, I mean minimize it. I was like 6. That's I'm not like a great arbiter of taste at 6 years old. I was like, he fell down. That was hilarious.
I mean, when I was that age, I loved Slimer in Ghostbusters
because he was just like big and silly.
But there's nothing of substance there. Like he's just a
but I mean, like there's also nothing horrifyingly offensive about Slimer looking back, right? Whereas like
maybe a little fat phobia.
Okay, sure. But like looking back on Jar Jar, right? Like me now, I am like I don't like Jar Jar for the reasons we've already touched on. And it's just like this idea of trying to rehabilitate him by going this like but he has a romantic relationship. Let's see. Jar Jar as more of an adult and less slapsticky. Yeah. But he's still like very like wide-eyed innocent. And I think there's like a couple of things I want to, so like while we were talking, I was thinking like another reason why they might have put Mace on this mission again externally is like because Mace is also one of the like few Black Jedi that we have, and having him as this counterpoint to Jar Jar there is maybe like a little more palatable. Right? So it's not just like this cartoonish version of Jar Jar, but then they also have like Jar Jar call him like Masterin Mace, which I think they do very purposefully because I think like in Jar Jar's accent, calling him Master Mace is like not a good look, right?
Yeah, it sounds a lot like Massa from like some old movie about slaves in the plantations or something terrible like that.
So I think like they're aware of it enough to like do this pivot, but not enough to just like fully steer clear, or like fully drop Jar Jar, right? Like you're saying, George Lucas is like, I will make you love him.
And I mean, even like Lucas could have saved face. He could have like, yeah, some 6-year-olds did love Jar Jar. Like, do you think if Jar Jar hadn't been in the second movie, would you have been like, oh my god, I hate Star Wars now, and like stop watching?
Not at all.
Yeah, and I think you could have just had him in the first movie and then let the character go. And Lucas could have been like, no, I did that to get kids to really love it because especially Phantom Menace was very much supposed to be the kids' movie. That's legit. That's fair. But it's just like putting him in every movie and like, I don't know. I hadn't seen this until like you brought this up, and the idea that Lucas wanted to rehabilitate Jar Jar just makes me so angry.
Yeah, and especially because like he's never gonna do the Jar Jar as a Sith thing, right? For the reasons of he's there because children love him, so you can't make him be evil and like aware of himself this whole time, right? He has to stay this like slapstick goofy character. And like trying to put him into this like serious situation just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
I think that's definitely very true. And especially because like it's not just him. I mean, he's maybe the worst, but like all the Gungan people are basically just like bad Jamaican stereotypes, or Caribbean stereotypes. And
yeah, but you at least have I forget the general's name, who's like usually with Jar Jar.
Yeah, he makes some kind of sense. I think he like didn't he like sacrifice himself in an earlier episode of the show?
Probably, yeah. When they were with like Dooku and some folks on a planet, yes. Yeah. But like he was a Gungan who I don't think was terribly offensive, right? Like he seemed, the accent is just bad. Yeah. But if we like put that aside because the accent is going to be bad, but like I guess we're committed to the accent now. Like that the general as a character was like a competent military leader who knew what he was doing, right? Whereas Jar Jar is like this guy who is exiled and then like comes back with these 2 Jedi and then becomes a senator for some reason and then is just like pratfalling his way to victory in all these ridiculous situations.
I think even, like Boss Nass, the big Gungan who's their leader in the Phantom Menace is interesting. And I think the way his accent is used with his voice is not as bad.
That's fair. I just don't like a lot of things about the way their culture is presented and kind of it feels like that they're very easily hoodwinked by both the Jedi and then later the Amidala, she gets them to work with them, but basically she's like, okay, can you all be cannon fodder while I save the day? But yeah, I agree with you that those characters are definitely a lot less offensive than Jar Jar himself.
Yeah, like you were saying, this whole idea of like Naboo. Then, like, are the people called the Naboo as well? Yeah, yes. Right? Yeah. So the Naboo...
The people on the surface, the human people on the surface are Nabooians.
Right. Yeah. So, like, your planet is named after the people who live on the surface, but there's also this entire species who lives underwater.
Right.
As, like, very clear second-class citizens. Like, yeah, that's not great.
Which I'll also say, the book Plagius, which goes into Sidious's origin story, does tell us a lot about Naboo. And again, this book is not officially canon, but obviously been drawn on a lot. In that book, they say that the humans on Naboo were colonizers. So, like, it feels like that's the name.
Obviously.
It's kind of like the name for where we are now is the United States of America, even though that's the name given by the colonizers. Yeah, but the Gungans were the native people. And so there's a whole like story of colonialism there that the book gets into a little bit in really interesting ways, but the show obviously doesn't.
Sure.
So on that cheery note, do we have any other kind of last comments, or can we escape?
One last thing. While like doing the research on the writer Rinsler, one of the things that came up in my search was from last November. Just an article that said that he was recovering, I believe, from pancreatic cancer. So that's the last I had seen on it. So no updates since then. But obviously, we wish him the best.
Of course, very much so. And yeah, that's definitely good wishes to pass on. But also, Riki, I just want to thank you. Like the amount of research you're doing for these things is just adding so much to our conversations. So I just want to kind of publicly appreciate what you're doing.
Well, I enjoy research as a potential future librarian.
Yes,
awesome.
Yes. If you think Riki should be a librarian, write in and tell him he should be a librarian.
Very much so. Very much so.
Something I've been thinking about.
Yeah.
Do it.
Well, thank you both so much. It's been a great discussion. I want to say a quick announcement for the fans. As you may well know, that we're getting a new Star Wars content, the first new Star Wars content we've had in a couple of months. The Bad Batch TV show is getting started. And for those who have no idea what it's about, the Bad Batch is it is a bunch of clones. And they were clones who were introduced in season 7 of the Clone Wars, which only came out pretty recently. And myself and Paul Hoppy did reviews of. So Riki, Sarah, and I are probably not going to go over it all again. We may just do like kind of one episode on that. But on this Star Wars show, along with the continuing stuff I'm doing with Sarah and Riki, we will also be doing week-by-week reviews of the new Bad Batch show as it comes out. And we're going to do that in partnership with another podcast called Animation Deliberation. That's a great podcast. It's also part of the Stranded Panda podcast network that this is part of. And they're specifically just looking at animated shows. And so they've been doing episodes on Young Justice as well as Invincible, which is a new animated show that's out that I know people are really raving about. I haven't gotten a chance to see it, but I've been listening to their episodes about Young Justice. They do great analysis. I'm really excited to have them on. And we'll probably start by giving kind of a Bad Batch primer for those who haven't seen the Bad Batch episodes or just want to be reminded. And then we're going to go in and do kind of week by week. So definitely be excited about that. And let us know what you think about these episodes, other things we've talked about. You can write into us. I do all the podcasting for this, my other podcast, Superhero Ethics, as well as some of the other projects I'm on, under the name of The Ethical Panda. And you can find us by going to Facebook or Twitter and searching for The Ethical Panda. I also have a TikTok under that name. And so on that TikTok, I cover a number of things. I do a lot of fan content. I also talk a lot about the murders of black people by police that are continuing and the protests I've gone to, as well as things about cooking and religion and disability. It's much wider than this stuff. But if you want to just focus on the podcast stuff, you can find us again on Facebook or Twitter. You can email us at theethicalpanda@gmail.com. Or, of course, you can find this podcast, along with the animation one, and a lot of other great ones by going to strandedpanda.com. And there you'll find great podcasts about a number of other things, including Star Trek, Star Wars, obviously, ethics discussions on the Superhero Ethics podcast I run, the MCU podcast, which is doing week-by-week stuff about Falcon the Winter Soldier, which, if you're not watching, is an amazing show. For all that I've hit you with, thank you all so much for listening. Riki, Sarah, thank you much for being a part of this, and have a good day.
Kenobi.
There it is.